So I was a bit surprised looking at the silos that you defined in a couple of slides back, that you put the design in the requirement silo and the architecture in the development silo. I would have tended to do it the other way around.
Well, so yeah, it's a little bit. Well, so we're still working on the words, you know, for what I should get back to the microphone. Well, we're still working on the words exactly for what each of these should be. So I think that really what we're focusing on in the green column is the review activities. So not necessarily doing proactive architecture, but really looking at an existing application and dissecting its architecture and analyzing it for vulnerabilities. Whereas in the orange column, the requirements and design, we're talking about actually doing the proactive, both architecture and design type advice under that defensive design bubble. Okay, so we talked about sort of the approach to improvement. Now we sort of get to what can you actually do with a maturity model like this. So as it turns out, there's lots of benefits that you can kind of pull when you have a model that's a little bit more flexible, and some of those are really just sort of defining roadmaps. So what we've done is gone through and sort of picked what we consider to be the four most likely types of organizations that are out there that would be interested. And we chose those organizations because they represent common use cases, and they're really kind of interesting because each one has a different style of software-induced risk, right? The kind of risk that you get when you're an ISV is vastly different than the kind of risk that you get from software when you're a financial services organization. They're just fundamentally different, which means that you have to build your assurance programs in different ways. So to kind of take a look at what a sample roadmap would look like. I know this is, you may not be able to read the words here. It's okay. They're basically just the 12 functions that are listed vertically here. And then what you see in the shaded area is basically what occurs in phase 1. And then the next column is what occurs in phase 2. And then the next column is what occurs in phase 3. So you can see in phase 1, you're improving education and guidance to level 1. You're making strategic planning level 1. And so forth. And then when you get to phase 2, some things stay the same, like security requirements. This one. Some improve to level 2, and others just go from level 0 to level 1, right? And so that's sort of the idea of how you would build your, this is effectively the roadmap for an entire assurance program in one half of a slide. So the idea is that you can use this to define what's appropriate for a given organization. The one we happen to be looking at right here is the recommended roadmap for ISVs. So, okay, so that's sort of a taste of what the sample roadmaps would look like to show you how to build a big program. Other things that you can do are actually make assurance program scorecards, because I can give you a roadmap from stage 0, but most people are not at stage 0. Every organization, at least probably everybody that's here, is at least doing something in their organization for application security already. So the idea is that you need to be able to take an organization, assess it against each of those 12 silos, and then sort of assign it a number for how well you're doing currently, and then you have effectively a scorecard. And then from there, you can build the roadmap going forward for what needs to improve. So the idea of is that you could use the scorecard to actually start off with a program, and you can use it to actually demonstrate improvement over time. So every quarter, you could say, okay, here's our new scorecard for how we're performing in terms of our assurance program. And since there's success metrics associated with each one of the levels, you can actually have a relatively quantifiable understanding of where your assurance program is at. This is an example of what a scorecard might look like, right? So you can say when you're at level 1, level 2, level 3, and you have this notion of sort of you're doing some of the things that are required for level 1, but not quite all of them, so you have this notion of sort of a half point that you might get there. Does that make sense? Okay. So the other thing that you can do when you have a maturity model like this, and we've done this with regard to PCI a little bit, is actually mapping it to existing standards. So foremost, since we're sort of using this as kind of a new version of CLASP, we want to be able to take people that are using CLASP now and map them into the maturity model pretty seamlessly, which I think is going to be pretty easy to do. We haven't quite finished all that work yet, but it should be pretty straightforward. The other thing is actually taking the existing standards that are out there, because having a new maturity model that's an island is not really useful to anybody, right? Because every organization that's out there has at least some standards that they have to already comply with. So I want to be able to demonstrate how the SAMM model can actually help you achieve those particular compliance requirements. And the way we do that is by actually taking each of the levels, each of the levels underneath each of the functions, and assigning specific sections from the standards and other compliance requirements that are out there, such as PCI, COBIT, SOX, the different ISOs that are out, and say basically by achieving this level, you will have already ticked off the following, the following sections of the following standards that are already out there in the universe. Now, to be fair, all that mapping is not done yet, but it's pretty easy to do, and we've done it with PCI, or at least parts of PCI, to just demonstrate how it would be done. Okay, so let's see. What the other thing that I wanted to talk about is sort of what else is in SAMM, to kind of give you a whole, what do we have built today, and what's sort of planned next. So what we have built today is kind of an introduction and the role definition. And that's really very similar to what you already see in CLASP today. We just have defined a set of roles, which is a pretty important thing to do, all in all. And then we actually have the definition of the maturity model. So for each of the 12 functions, for each of the 3 levels, we define activities, and we define a number of other, the number of other bits that I talked about, so success metrics and so forth, and personnel requirements that go underneath each of those. We have recommended roadmaps, and we've built that out for ISVs and online service providers, but we haven't built them out fully yet for financial services organizations or government organizations. There's some case studies, so we sort of kind of made up a case study just to show how it would work. But what our goal is now is to actually go out and work with a few organizations to get like a couple of real case studies made, because I think it's very easy to do with just a few conversations with an organization, but it's just a matter of going out and actually doing that work. So yeah, we want to build out a few case studies to kind of demonstrate how you might actually take the model and apply it to a given organization. And then we have mappings to standards and regulations, which still need to be completed. We have a couple of them done, but as I mentioned, a few more need to be finished. So, okay, so let's see. So what comes up next? Really, what we're looking for next, and our most important goal is to get some feedback and some real-world case studies to actually make the thing concrete. I want to build out more roadmaps where it makes sense. So if you are an organization that you don't think maybe fits in one of the buckets that I mentioned, or you think you have a unique viewpoint on how an assurance program needs to be built, I'm definitely interested in talking to you. So please send me an email or just talk to me afterwards, and I'd be more than happy to discuss, because that's really the kind of feedback we're looking for now. We're looking to get some more coverage. Really, any of the additional resources that are already in CLASP need to be migrated into the maturity model or into the SAMM sort of doc that we're building out, because there's lots of like checklists and things like that are included in CLASP that we haven't fully moved over yet. We kind of started with the top level restructuring, which is where we're at now. And then we really are sort of working towards a public release that's sort of officially announced. As I mentioned before, anyone that's interested in getting a copy of it is more than welcome to it now. But we're still working on exactly how that's going to happen, and I'll defer all those questions to Brian since he's driving that bus. But can I answer questions for anybody?
I understand that you haven't been able to map everything, but as we said before, when you look at a model like Touchpoint, when you go there, you really don't see the real definition of what those things that they are talking about are. Your 12 points, have you been able to at least define them, what they are, describe everything in it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've defined everything. I mean, so for instance, I'm just picking randomly here, security testing, right? We have the